Hello there, this is James Uscroft, James1978, rounding off my series But We Won't Feel Special Anymore, Links Daar is Je Underbar, because, dude, the last 18 months have been a trip, proving once and for all that a liberal is merely a fascist with a saviour complex.
Roll credits.
As everyone has spent the last 3 months explaining ad nauseum, Kamala lost because people were angry about corporate price gouging, and just as they did in almost every election around the world in 2024, punished the people in power by either staying home or voting for the alternative, regardless of what that alternative happened to be, and in America's case, the only alternative was Trump. As a brief side note, in fact, never forget that fascists only ever gain power because moderate liberal centrists are more terrified of what they condemn as the left, either empowering them directly, as they did with Hitler and Mussolini, or in this case, by devoting so much time and energy over so many decades to destroying the left in America to preserve the status quo, that the fascist illusion of change under Trump was the only remaining option. Indeed, the fact that Kamala did everything short of literally running as the Republican candidate while campaigning with Liz Cheney as the voice of the establishment and the champion of the status quo certainly did nothing to help her win, and although talking heads tried to blame wokeness for her defeat in the days after the election, they literally couldn't point to anything other than the fact that she's a black woman, which of course is peak wokeness in itself.
To be clear, this is not the first time that we've heard this dumbass argument. Oh, if it wasn't for the left and all of their influence in the Democratic Party, Kamala would have probably won. Except, you can't rewrite history, especially if it just happened. Kamala Harris ran the campaign that Third Way wanted her to run. She didn't focus at all on identity politics. She rarely mentioned LGBTQ+ rights, didn't even reference trans rights on the policy page on her website aside from the T in LGBT. She was extremely hawkish on foreign policy. She was pro-business, pro-crypto. She was right-wing on immigration. And in the last stretch of her campaign, she campaigned almost exclusively to moderate Republicans with Liz fucking Cheney. How exactly did the far left cost her the election? She ran the campaign that they wanted her to run, and she lost. She didn't support progressive policies like Medicare for all or free college, or full student debt cancellation, or a housing first policy, or a weapons embargo on Israel. I can go on and on. She ran a milquetoast Republican-led campaign. They all said that she should run, and she lost. And all of the excitement was centered in the beginning of her campaign when she brought on Tim Walz, until, of course, they muzzled him. But yet, they had the campaign that they wanted, and the left still gets blamed for it. You can't make this shit up. But therein lies the problem. See, Democrats actually do know how to fight. It's just that they only choose to fight the left, people in their own party, as opposed to the far right, as opposed to fascists. See, if they resisted Trump half as hard as they resist progressives, we might actually have a chance to save the country. And to be clear, even though we're talking about Third Way here with regard to this article and what they say, this is what the party basically wants. Most of the party shares their hatred for the left, even if they're less explicit about it.
But as soon as Kamala lost, though, it seemed as if every blue MAGA liberal and their dog went out of their way to blame and persecute Arab Americans and Hispanic and Latina voters, going to McDonald's and Starbucks to revel in the slaughter of Palestinian children, apparently labouring under the absurd delusion that Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, not American citizens, had somehow voted for Trump. But then again, Google searches in the days after the election for "Did Biden drop out?", "Who is Kamala Harris?" and "How do tariffs work?", coupled with the fact that the President of the United States has absolutely no control whatsoever over the price of eggs, proves once again that most voters have no fucking clue what they're actually voting for, and that, to quote Winston Churchill, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. As everyone has also spent the last 3 months pointing out, of course, even if every single voter that stayed home, voted Green, or even voted for Trump because of the genocide had voted for Kamala, then she still would have lost. But at the end of the day, though, as far as these liberals were concerned, the uncommitted and abandoned Biden/abandoned Harris movement's crime wasn't costing them the election, but challenging their conceit that they are always the good guys, because how on earth could any Arab American possibly have empowered the greater of two evils? How could any Arab American possibly vote for Trump, cluck the talking heads condescendingly as they go to brunch and champion the virtues of their progressive girl boss genocide? Don't they remember the Muslim ban? Bitch, they lived through it. Emphasis on the word lived, as in survived. So given the choice between the administration that was literally arming and funding the genocide of their extended families and the guy who banned them from getting visas, they did what you've been demanding we all do for decades and chose the lesser of two evils. And the thing that burns in your petty little vaginas like a dose of the clap is that irony of all ironies, in this case, you were the greater evil. After all, as I explained in far too much detail in my 9-part series with 4 previous addendums, links down at the underbar, the only question when it comes to politics, economics, human rights, civil rights, and everything else along those lines is whether you personally feel threatened by the prospect of too much equality. Whether you fear that if society becomes less grossly rigged and unequal, then you will lose out somehow, especially if, and I can't stress this enough, the only thing that you're afraid of losing is that you won't get to feel special, superior, or be the good guy anymore. This being the case then, the thing that unites everyone on what we call the far right, right wing and centre of the supposed political spectrum is that from the most violent and bigoted fascist to the most moderate milquetoast liberal centrist, when all is said and done, their politics is all about them, their comfort, their privilege, their convenience, their entitlement, and above all, their egos, literally caring more about painting the other side as the bad guys so that they're the good guys by default than they are about their own supposed principles, policies, or not being hypocritical, self-serving scum. Indeed, this is how the party that supposedly cares about human rights could literally arm, fund, and laugh about a genocide by telling themselves that the Republicans would be worse. So now, in spite of the fact that it's literally impossible and he's only ever talked about it, every liberal and their dog is now falling over themselves to rub our faces in Trump's brain fart about ethnically cleansing Gaza so that he and his son-in-law Jared Kushner can make billions from property development. See? Didn't we tell you that Trump would be worse? How so? Once again, his vague arse-pulled concept of a plan is literally impossible.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
But even if it wasn't, even if he could actually displace the entire Gazan population, you know what's worse than ethnically cleansing 1.8 million people? Arming and funding the genocide of 500,000 and making Gaza uninhabitable in the first place so that Trump can pretend that his ethnic cleansing is actually a humanitarian gesture. On top of that as well, what makes your crimes against humanity so much worse is the fact you honestly still expect the families of your victims to have sided with you against the supposed greater evil, to get on their knees and thank you for committing a progressive girl boss genocide because Trump's genocide would somehow be worse. And when they don't grovel before you and massage your egos, you become as vindictive, as bigoted, and yes, even as violent as the most tattooed neo-Nazi, reveling in Trump's deportation of Hispanic and Latina voters who made the grievous error of not choosing the lesser of two evils, and cheering on the murder of children to teach them a lesson and show them who the real bad guys are. In the end, then, this is what makes liberals nothing but fascists with a saviour complex, like self-righteous abolitionists in the 1800s demanding that the enslaved people who they freed spend their lives thanking and praising them for their magnanimous benevolence by working them for free out of gratitude anyway, and the moment that the former enslaved people realise that no, this is merely a more benevolent form of oppression, cheering on the KKK as they teach the uppity, ungrateful Negroes a lesson about who the real bad guys are. Because, of course, liberals are always spineless, self-serving cowards who'll never dare to get their own hands dirty and rely on fascists to do the dirty work of protecting them from too much equality. In fact, to paraphrase one Instagram post which I wish that I'd saved, a liberal is locked in a room with a fascist, a communist, and an anarchist. He has a gun with 2 bullets. What does he do? He gives the gun to the fascist and lectures the others on how it's their fault for being too radical.